This Sunday, we're going to talk about story and kind of like why story matters so much and how really story itself is this kind of structure, essential structure of cosmos itself. Reality is a story. And to be alive is a bunch of steps. So something like this. It's to know that my life's a story. That's step one. That's a very big deal to actually get that my life is a story. We actually don't get our lives are a story. I mean, we go to the therapist to talk about what happened 15 years ago and, how mother was abusive and dad was abusive and they might have been or they might not have been. So we go through recursive loops in our story, so we get that dimension of story, but we don't get this larger sense of our life as a great mythology, a great story. And so it's not just the places I was wounded, it's what's the great mythology, the great story, the great tale of my life, in which I am a prince and in which I am a princess, I'm a king, I'm a queen. And we're very good at pathologizing others and ourselves, but actually the invocation is mythologize, don't pathologize. Right? It's a myth, it's a great myth, so it's a story. So one is I've got to recognize my life's a great story, but then two is I need to now get the storyline. All these details are actually part of this larger, wondrous myth, but this is, right? But not as a psychological exercise, but as an actual metaphysical exercise. This is the nature of reality. Reality speaks and discloses and whispers through story. So story is the prism of revelation, right? And it's the way reality talks is through story. It's very deep to realize that. Now, three, I need to be able to listen to my story. So to listen to my story, I have to step out of my story. So in order to listen to my story, I got to get into non-story. So it means I got to go so deep into silence. I go so deep into silence, into the silence of presence that's underneath all the words. Right? I go so deep into this realization that yesterday doesn't determine today. I step out of the separate self storyline, and I step into the wider field of Eros. I step into the field of Eros value. I step into the field of the intimate universe, which is brimming, delighted, alive, pulsing, ecstatic, right? That's the world, right? That I'm actually in that larger field. I'm being loved and held and, adored, right? And embraced, literally in every second. So in order to enter my story, I first have to change my consciousness. I have to change myself. I have to actually recognize my deeper self. I have to recognize that I'm beyond the kind of recursive surface patterns of yesterday. So I need to actually step out of my story. So in order to step into my story, I've got to step out of my story. We call that the move from separate self to true self. That is what the move from separate self to true self is. It's exactly that. I go from story to non-story. From there, I can then step back into my unique self, into my story, and say, okay, now what are the outlines of my story? Right? Does that make sense? Now, to know my story has 10 elements. That's what we're going to talk about this Sunday. What are the 10 elements that exist in my story, that live in the cosmic story, without which I can't find my way. I've got no chance. I've got to know these 10 elements. And this is a Da Vinci revolution in understanding the nature of self and the nature of the universe. So it answers directly the question of where are we? The universe story. It answers directly the question of who am I? It answers directly the question of how the who and the where question are completely interrelated. And finally, it answers the question of what? What should I do? What's mine to do in this story? What's mine to do in this story? That's what we're going to do this Sunday. That's insane.